I really liked that idea of being able to be a part of a global movement of supporting women on their path towards economic independence, because ultimately that is freedom. Economic independence is freedom.
Welcome to the Heart of Advocacy, where we shine a spotlight on remarkable individuals committed to building a more equitable and just world. I'm Doni.
And I'm Ken. We're with The Advocates, a law firm serving the Pacific Northwest. Join us as we explore the inspiring journeys of these heroes who uplift marginalized voices, serve their communities, and break down barriers to create a brighter future for everyone. So today we're really excited. We get to talk with Malia Razzaia.
Yeah, Malia is the executive director of Dress for Success Seattle, which is a nonprofit with the vision of helping women gain economic independence. Their aim is that women are treated with dignity and respect, and they are directly impacting their lives and those of their families.
Their goal is just to help women find the way to empower themselves for freedom.
Malia was just extraordinary, really inspiring.
Really powerful interview. It's good.
If you could go back 20 years, what would your past self think of the work you're doing today?
I think she'd probably be pretty mad at me that I live back in the States and that I'm not still overseas. So there's that component. Though I think she'd probably understand because I got married and now I'm still here. The work itself, is it cheesy or corny to say, like, I think she'd be proud?
No.
I also, more than anything, I think she'd be really confused because I'm confused on a daily basis. And I just kind of make it through the day. And I think she'd be really confused as to how the heck I ended up where I am and what I'm doing and why on earth I'm still in Seattle, because I keep trying to leave and I keep coming back. I think she'd be really on board with, I've always had a deep passion for supporting communities that have been traditionally held back from opportunity. And that especially, I have been a woman's woman, a girl's girl from day one. Both my parents are very strong folks that raised me, that there's no, limits to what I can do just because I'm a girl or a woman. But I think particularly my dad, my sweet dad, he is a flaming feminist who would look at you like you were crazy and had four heads if you told him that. He'd be like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, and yet, one day I was talking to him and I was telling him about this show I was watching called the Madam Secretary.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah, I don't watch that show anymore. And I was like, oh, Daddy, why not? And he goes, I just don't understand. It's Madam Secretary. It's about her. Why do they have to give so much credence to her husband? Like, why can't a woman just carry a show? And I looked at him and I was like, and you wonder where I came from. So I think she'd be proud, right? Yeah. Of that aspect of it. I think she'd be proud that I realized very early on in my career that corporate America wasn't for me. I needed to do something that made a difference.
What part would she be confused about?
I think just the work I do. She'd probably be like, one, how the heck did you get there? And again, sometimes I can't follow my own timeline. And then just two, I think the work is complex and complicated. And I don't think 20-year-old me had the knowledge, skills, or experience. And definitely not the self-awareness to have any idea what the position looks like or the work really truly looks like.
My dad is a very sweet, loving, supportive, kind man. I love my dad so much. And he came out to visit me a couple weeks ago. They live in LA. And he's also conservative Catholic, as
is mine. Is mine.
Yeah. And, but he is also, so he goes to church in Santa Monica. They have the rainbow flag up in the church. And So it's like I think it's a progressive Catholic. But
West Coast Catholics tend to
West
be.
Coast
West
Catholic.
Coast Catholic. That's
But
the thing.
he is pretty strong. He's 75. So he's like, I don't think he's going to change his mind that abortion should be, he's, obviously anti, what is it? I don't even know what not pro-choice is.
He's anti-choice.
He's anti-choice.
Anti-choice.
Like, what is the term for that?
He would call it pro-life.
He would call it
Thank
pro-life,
you.
but I have
just
very
removed
strong
it
feelings
from my
about
mind.
that term.
Exactly.
It's actually not pro-life. It's anti-choice. But
Yes, I think so too. Anti-choice.
happy to
Agreed.
get on that soapbox later if
My
you'd like.
dad, I'm like talking to him about it, and he's like, "Well, I don't care if you do it. I just it wouldn't be something that I would do." And I'd be like, "Well,
I get
you
that from
are."
my dad a lot too.
And I'm like, "Dad, that is literally the definition of pro-choice."
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're saying you
We're not
don't care
saying
what I
we're-
would do or what other people would do. I just wouldn't do it. And so, yeah, it's funny that you say your dad would be like surprised when somebody says he's a feminist when he's like everything he's doing is like supporting,
I tell him all the time too. I'm like, you're a giant feminist. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, okay. Listen, all right.
I know
It's fine.
you are, and that's
Yeah,
and that's
fine.
what's
And
that's
listen,
good enough.
You raised me, and now I am supporting women across the board to be the next generation of powerful women, and as they embrace their power, and whether you want to accept responsibility for that or take credit for it is 100% up to you.
Yeah.
I'm still going to give it to you though.
Mm-hmm. So, I love that.
Okay, so we're talking about your parents or your dad.
Yeah.
Okay, they're going to give you a Google review on how difficult you were.
It's funny. We just took the DISC assessment. And I don't know, do you guys know anything about the DISC assessment?
Is it like the predictive index, or is it like
it's like a personality thing,
yeah.
right? And so there's, the color code, and there's strengths finder, and there's all kinds of stuff. And so the DISC assessment, D is dominant, I is influencer, S is like support, and then C is conscientious, right? I am high D, like squarely in the D. There is really no fluctuation on either who I am naturally. It's called your natural style or your adapted style, which is kind of what you've become as you've had to adapt to your environment. And I am D through and through. And I can just hear my parents' voice, particularly my dad's, but my parents' voice going, no shit. Really? I definitely was probably tough, super independent, super strong-willed. I think the Google review would be, positively delightful when in a good mood. However, can be.
But.
Yeah, but not and, but. Also basically a monster sometimes. So that's another one I could probably blame my dad for. I think, what was it? Maybe 10 years ago or something. I went home. I was living overseas at the time. And I think I was in Tokyo at the time. And I came home for the holidays. And my mom had a friend of hers that had a little 2-year-old. And they were a small family. We're a small family. And so my mom invited them over for the holidays. And my mom and her friend, of course, are following this toddler all over the place, toddling after her and making sure that she's okay and everything. And there's my dad over in the recliner the whole time. And he's like, leave her alone. She's got to learn sometime. Leave her alone. She's got to learn sometime. And I remember, do you ever have those moments, right? Where it is an absolute light bulb. And you're like, holy cow, this is why I am the way that I am. This is who I am. Oh. And I realized like that streak of independence and that assertiveness and that desire to do things my way, despite how society socializes us to be, solely comes from having my dad especially, but my mom too, really constantly reminding me, you got to learn sometime. You can do this anytime, right? Like you fall down, you can get yourself back up, and I think that it was that moment, that light bulb moment where I realized like how formative that behavioral pattern as a parent is, and also what a nightmare teenager that probably made me, right? So I think that Google review would not be 5 stars. Well, my mom would my mom would probably say it was 5 stars because I'm her baby and blah blah blah, right? But if you asked her to really think about it, it might drop to like half a star. At least teenage years. So
for sure.
Fair enough.
yeah, she will. She does say now how proud she is though, and she was in the nonprofit world as well, and so I kind of followed in her footsteps. And my dad says I'm allergic to money. And I said, no, I'm actually really great with people giving me money.
Yeah,
it's
part
just,
of my job is giving money.
It's just weird how none of it goes to me. But I think they're really proud now, but I probably was not fun. Yeah, probably not.
Are you from Seattle?
Sort of. I'm originally from Cleveland.
Okay.
And then we moved here when I was in grade school.
Okay.
So I was raised by Midwestern parents. With Midwestern ideals. I was just talking to somebody the other day about like, what does that mean? And I was like, there are Mrs. and Misters that will be Mrs. and Misters in my life until the day I die.
Yeah.
In fact, my parents' lawyer was actually a family friend that I grew up with, and he will be Mr. Russell until the day I die. Like, we met with him recently, my husband and I did, to talk about our will, and I can't call him Greg. Like, I can't, like, he's Mr. Russell to me. Those Midwestern values, right?
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So I'm originally from there. And then we moved to London when I was...
Fourth grade?
Didn't quite finish 4th grade. Yeah. Yep. You have those notes.
Yeah. That leads to the next question really nicely.
Yeah. So, and then we came back and I finished out high school here. And then just started bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
So
went back abroad.
Yeah. Well, I went back abroad in college, and then moved around the States a little bit. Came back to Seattle for a little bit of a stint. I really just keep, it's like a boomerang. Like I just keep coming back here. I leave and then I come back. This is home.
Yeah.
It is home.
It's a good place to call home. I would say if you had to call a place a home.
I don't know there's anywhere else in the U.S. I'd want to live. I have lived in multiple other places in the U.S. And I think ultimately, and I've been to 48 of the 50 states.
Wow.
So, I mean,
48 of 50.
All right. Well, what are the two you haven't been to? We got to know.
What are they? Arkansas and Oklahoma.
All right.
So okay.
Yeah. Arkansas and Oklahoma. So
I've never been to either. So
me neither.
Ironically, they're two my husband has been to of the like 10 states he's been to.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Together,
together
50.
we're a whole
That's really impressive,
country.
Actually. Yeah.
So.
Let's go back to 4th grade.
Yeah.
Your family moved to London.
Yes.
And it had a profound impact.
It did.
On the formation of your views.
It did.
Of the world.
It did.
So who did you meet there that was part of making that impact?
I don't know if it was any one person. I think it was seeing life differently than the U.S. bubble, right? Like, I mean, lots of things changed, right? We went from living in a suburb into living in the inner city. We went from living in a predominantly white area to living in a much more culturally diverse area and just a city in general. We went from driving everywhere to taking public transportation. We went from eating typical American foods to trying random different foods that are available in London that, you know, we didn't have, especially back in the 90s, that we didn't have in Seattle. And so I think it's just when you're, 10, 11 years old, to flip your whole life upside down like that, it made me see that the world was a lot bigger than my little brain thought it was. And I give my parents so much credit. Apparently this podcast is going to be about my parents. I give them so much credit, right? Because people pushed hard against them. And they were like, what are you doing? Right? Why are you flipping her life upside down? Like, you don't do this to a kid. Like, I mean, borderline telling them they were bad parents for doing this. And I mean, good on my parents for being like, no, actually, this is the best thing that we could do for her.
And was it work? What made them?
My dad's job got transferred over there. Yeah. So he got an opportunity to work over there. And
that's exactly how you would see it. It's an opportunity. If you could have all your kids spend some time in another great city outside of the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I could do that with every one of our kids.
And we had already been overseas. We'd at minimum, I think we'd been to Ireland at that point, because we have our families on my dad's side's from County Clare in Ireland, and so we had gone back and found our whole family farm and the graves and everything. So I had been out of the country prior to this, but I think living in another country and another culture.
Exactly.
And yes, it was still an English-speaking country. So, I mean, there was a certain part of that. Although at that age, I did come back with an accent. And once in a blue moon, you can hear something, I'll say, has like just a slight little British accent to it. It's rare, but I sound much more Midwestern than anything. I encourage anyone and everyone with kids, get your kids out of the country that you're from originally, if you can, if you have that privilege. And that I think is also really important, is not everyone has the privilege to be able to do that. And that's probably something else I've learned significantly over the years and all the places that I've lived. And why I do the work I do now is the reality is recognizing my own privilege and the opportunities that have been afforded to me. But the reality is the most of the world doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And so how do I take that and support others in the world to achieve their hopes and their dreams and broaden their perspective, but in an authentic way, right? Like based on how they need that support. The idea of being community driven, right? Versus walking into a scenario where I say, okay, here's all my skills and I'm going to do this for you. Instead saying, okay, here's all the things I've done, I've learned, I know, and how can I help you? What are the things you need help with? And if they don't know what they need help with, how can I help you figure out what you
Exactly.
need?
Yeah.
Right? And so if we go back all the way back to your question about like the profound effect that had on me, I think that perspective change, that shift started when I was in 4th, 5th grade living in London and seeing that people live in different ways. And I can't hold people accountable to the expectations of how either I want to live my life or how I was socialized to live my life, based on the way I'm growing up, my socioeconomic status, the color of my skin, the expectations of my parents, like whatever that looks like. I don't get to hold other people accountable to my expectations.
Talk to us about teen years, education. Tell us more.
Yeah. So also come from a conservative Catholic family. And I actually went to Catholic school from 1st grade all the way through 12th grade.
Wow.
Yeah. And, but I have always been one that just does not, I said this earlier, I am not a fan of living my life the way people expect me to. And so I actually, 2014 or 15, I knew I wasn't coming back to the States anytime soon. And so I came back to clear out my storage unit. And I had a friend come and help me. And I was going through a bunch of paperwork and I found all these old papers from high school. And I start going through all these old papers from high school. And mind you, again, Catholic high school, one of these classes was taught by a priest. And one of these classes was taught by a sister, not a nun, a sister. And one of my papers was about why abortion is vital and important to women's reproductive health.
Love that.
And they loved you.
Oh, they loved me. And then one of my other papers was on the importance of recognizing love is love, and that the idea of I don't think. I'd have to think back about whether the term LGBTQIA was, I definitely know the QIA wasn't there at the time, but essentially the whole paper was about how queer love is love. And, to me, that story illustrates how profoundly I am who I am through to the core since I was a kid.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, to grow up that way, but already have those views.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have those views, you go, of course, anybody can. But it's hard to teach or to change.
Were both your parents Catholic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My parents do not hold the same views as I do.
Interesting. Yeah. So I was fortunate in that I don't know, fortunate, but I had perspective of, a broader perspective because my dad was very Catholic, church every Sunday. If we traveled before the internet, he was finding a church wherever we were to make sure he could go on Sunday. My mom is as like non-religious, liberal as they get.
Yeah.
So I just had these two opposite sides of the spectrum,
no.
which is why I can, I think I ended up where I did with those two perspectives. But I mean, having both of your parents.
Oh yeah, my parents, particularly my mom. My dad's a little more middle of the road, but my mom jokes all the time that they don't know where they went wrong. And I always point out to them, I'm like, actually, I know where you went right. You taught me to question things and to push back and to make up my own mind and to challenge and to not accept what doesn't feel right or feel good to me, and to be a decent human being. And so, maybe I fell on the other side of the spectrum, but that's actually all because of you. Even if I didn't fall on your side, I couldn't have been where I am today if it wasn't you teaching me to be open and giving me the skills to make my own decisions and to think broader and bigger. And I think my parents are going to give this interview 10 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm just imagining what kind of a great place it would be if everybody had to learn that skill early on.
Yeah.
The ability to just say, question it. I mean, it doesn't matter where you land, but just try to figure out why you're getting there instead of just saying, well, that's how it is. I mean,
I've never been good at just accepting that's how it is. I was, going back to your question, as a kid and as a teenager, I was the one that was like, but why?
Yeah.
But why? But why? Like, I need to know the why, right? And my poor parents, I don't know, just do it.
Because this is what we do. Yeah. Not good enough.
Not good enough. You got to tell me why.
What does it mean to you to be a nomad?
To me, being a nomad is a feeling. It doesn't matter whether I'm going a few hours to the coast or I'm getting on a plane and going overseas. The exhilaration, adrenaline, joy, surrealness that absolutely envelops me when I step into a new space and a new world. It's electric. I am almost a whole new person. My energy level changes, my excitement shifts, I'm even more open to trying different foods, being a nomad to me is so much more than just the actual physical action of moving around, either by travel or by living. I think it is something that absolutely envelops you. When you step into the thing that fills you with the most joy that you could possibly, there's never a moment that I am happier than when I am on an adventure. I miss it. I unfortunately, where I haven't been able to do a lot of traveling over the last few years. That said, we've probably done more traveling than the average person would do in their lifetime in the last couple of years. But for me, it's not a lot. I miss
and it sounds like it's not necessarily just overseas.
It's not. No. For 4th of July weekend, I got a wild hare, and we were supposed to go camping and it didn't work out. And I decided at 10 a.m. on the 3rd that I wanted to go out to Long Beach. It's one of my happy places.
I love Long Beach.
I love Long Beach, Washington is just absolutely incredible. And I miraculously found a place for us to stay, invited some friends to join us. And by 8 p.m. we were in Long Beach, and I was happy as a clam.
When you travel, I mean, we have different views on this part.
Yeah.
Ooh, I know where you're going with this, Ken.
So is that the time when you get that energy and you just can't see enough? I mean, it's like there's not enough hours in the day. Or is that the time when a great book and the beach, and it's just the time to unplug?
I am definitely not in camp 1. I'm somewhere closer to camp 2. Going back to my parents. My dad instilled me very early on, one of our trips to Ireland very early on, we missed the Blarney Stone, and I was really upset about it. And I remember my dad saying to me, you have to leave stuff to see next time. And that hit me really hard. And it's been very embedded in me. So now, but no, I am not going to exhaust myself. I am going to enjoy myself.
You can enjoy
it. As long as I see pretty things, I eat good food. And at some point I have this surreal moment. And anyone who's traveled knows what I'm talking about, right? It's that moment where you're like, how is this my life?
Yeah.
Like, this is so cool. At some point on the trip, I'm good.
We should talk about your org.
Dress for Success,
Dress for Success, Seattle.
Yep.
How long? You're the executive director there.
Am.
What is that?
Somebody put me in charge.
I know you said it's confusing, but what does that mean? What are you responsible for?
I think what's confusing is the role of an executive director.
Correct.
Because you are, especially in a smaller sized organization. So we're about a $1 million organization. You are not just the CEO, you're also the CFO and the CTO and the CIO.
Hopefully not
and
CHRO.
Well, nope. That too. Although we do have an HR partner now. Thank goodness. She's amazing. And, I do get some support. I have a bookkeeper. Thank goodness. I have a grant writer. Cause there's two sides of fundraising. We laugh about it all the time. She's one side, I'm the other. Which is there's the written side of fundraising, which is like grants and the written appeals and all of that. And then there's the people side of fundraising, like going out and building relationships and getting people to invest in your organization from a social side of things. I love that side. I come up from fundraising. That's really my career shifted from corporate account management into nonprofit account management and fundraising. And just that's how I came up into the work that I do. And I love that side of it. I mostly want to poke my eyeballs out at the idea of writing a grant. So we have a grant writer, thank goodness. If I'm allowed to do a shout out, Bloom Grant Consulting, if you need a grant writer. That is who you should have writing your grants. She's probably the most talented grant writer that I have ever encountered.
Nice.
But having all of those different roles and all of that different work, and then on top of having to manage the finances and the IT and all of that, I also have to manage people and their roles and what they're doing and the vision of the organization. And you have all that. And then in the nonprofit world, right, you have your board of directors. And I know that there are board of directors in corporate world, but in the nonprofit world, governance is a totally different thing, right? Because those 13 people are fiduciarily and legally responsible for my organization. And they've brought me on to run the day-to-day operations, right? But ultimately, there are 13 people who are invested in running the organization that are in theory supposed to operate by one voice. Theory doesn't always
translate,
right?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, my current board is absolutely phenomenal. I am in this ED support group that people will be talking all the time about how terrible their boards are. And I'm like, yeah, I can't relate. My board's kind of amazing.
Well, that's cool.
But I've been in situations where my board was very much not amazing. And I know how tough that can be on a nonprofit, and I know where folks are coming from. So I think that adds an even more complicated space to the role, is that not only am I managing the organization and the staff within that and the work that they're doing to carry out the vision and strategy of the board and the organization, but then I'm also supporting and managing 13 individuals who want to invest their time and energy and skills into an organization. And an ED is kind of just like the linchpin, and everybody, it just all kind of goes around the ED. And so I think it's just a complex, difficult job. The burnout rate of EDs is really high because you get to a point where either you have sacrificed everything and you have no work-life balance, or somehow in some way it's gotten ugly and it's not worth it anymore. Despite your love for the mission or the work. There's lots of other ways in which it can just be hard. The burnout for EDs is tough. And so if you don't have a good support system, if you don't have people in your corner, it can be really rough. It is the loneliest thing I have ever done.
Why do that as opposed to create your own? forth?
That's a good question. I actually have my own business. So I started a consultancy and realized that I have no desire to have my own organization. Well, one, I'll never start my own nonprofit. And anytime somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I want to start a nonprofit," my first response is, "No, please don't." There's so many nonprofit organizations out there. The chances are the work that you are doing is probably being done in some capacity. Please do informational interviews. Go and meet with other organizations. I don't know an ED or a CEO that wouldn't meet with someone and talk about what they're doing. I tell people all the time, if you want to know the work that we're doing, just put some time on my calendar. Like, I'm happy to talk about it. Because there's just so many nonprofit organizations out there. And I do think that diversity is good. And I also think we should be collaborating together rather than trying to work in silos. I'm a big believer that how fundraising and nonprofiteering was done back in my mom's generation is not how we should be doing it now. I think we should be working together.
How do you shift that?
I think things are shifting with my generation coming in. The more and more you have late Xers and millennials coming into leadership roles, you're getting a much more collaborative environment. You shift it that way. I think also we're seeing nonprofit world is very female dominated, and we're seeing that, you know, as women are learning to support each other, not to tear each other down, which is a ideal that has been, you know, we've been socialized to since we were kids, that women are supposed to compete with each other, right? And as we fight against that socialization and learn that we actually get further when we lift each other up and support each other, I think you're also seeing a shift in culture and expectations and how organizations are running. And so there's that component of it, right? Like, I would never start my own nonprofit. Starting my own consulting business, I just realized that it's like the pinnacle, right? Start your own thing, you know, be the entrepreneur. Like, this is what we're taught by society is like the good thing, you know? And so I tried to do it and I realized I hated it. And then I was like, why can't you do this? Malia, you're smart, you're capable, you're intelligent, you know people, you're good at fundraising, all of these things. And then I don't know, finally I realized I was like, why do I care? Like, why do I care what other people think? Why do I care that society might think that I should be able to start my own thing? I don't want to.
Right.
I just don't want to do it, honestly. And so I walked away. And long story short, I ended up where I'm at now. And so if I can support others, I'd rather do that rather than have my own business. And
having your own business, a lot of people think it's just this panacea where you don't work for
First
anybody.
Of all, good word.
I mean,
I love that.
But it's not like you're not working for others, even when you ask me how I know.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably do that. I mean, we answer to more people now than if we had a boss.
And the bigger you get, the more people you have to answer to, right? And manage and
the drama.
Oh, the drama. Yeah.
Drama. It's not dull.
Yeah. It's not
I'll say
dull.
that much.
It's not dull.
So Dress for Success allows you to have a global organization that has a global mission, while each chapter is focused on the specific needs of the local community.
Yep.
Why is this so important?
I think as I looked at realizing I didn't want to do my own thing, I really wanted to work in an organization that had that global impact. I had been overseas for the last about decade and really valued the work that I was doing in communities. And even though I was doing hyper-local work there, I still had that global experience in the work that I was doing. And so when I came across the listing for Dress for Success Seattle, I realized that there was a global impact, but with this hyper-local focus. Because there's, the mothership Dress for Success Worldwide is in New York. There's 140 something affiliates in 20 something countries. That number shifts constantly, so I never know exactly what it is. But each dress is unique to the area in which they serve. So Dress for Success Seattle is a local organization with a globally recognized name, but a local organization. All of the funds that come to Dress here, all of our programs, they are focused on women in the state of Washington. And I really liked that idea of being able to be a part of a global movement of supporting women on their path towards economic independence, because ultimately that is freedom. Economic independence is freedom. And to be able to be a part of a global movement towards women's freedom, but to do that here locally and tangibly, and see and meet women that are able to find that movement and within their lives where they can really take control. And I have a real hard time with the idea of empowerment, right? We are not empowering anyone. Empowerment is a personal thing. But what we can do is support folks on their path to claiming their own power.
You have this local chapter or organization. Affiliate.
Yeah.
How much can you direct what you're doing as opposed to, I mean, I'm sure there's some boundaries. You have to stay consistent with the overall mission of the overall organization.
Yeah. So
but
the overall,
does that leave room to...
So much room. Yeah, it's wonderful, actually. It's the mission of Dress for Success is to support women on their path towards economic independence. In our mission, there's some more around, how we do that. And through professional services, a network of support and attire, et cetera. But because so most people know us as the clothing organization, we're so much more than that. But what that gives us is a lot of space to customize the work that we do to the community and the needs of the community. So here in Seattle, we're really fleshing out these 3 pillars that we focus on of digital equity, financial education, and career support services. Okay. And the idea being that, we're here to support the areas that are very vital to Washington State, particularly Western Washington as well, around, closing the gap in digital equity. Women are often, the statistics will show they're about 50% behind men when it comes to opportunities for training and career growth in the digital landscape. And one of the biggest things there is particularly women fall behind in new technologies that come out. So as AI has become a bigger and bigger thing, right, we're working to put laptops in the hands of women in our community who are not digitally connected, so that they have that resource. They have that thing to get them started. If a digital or tech career is somewhere that they want to go. We're also providing that financial education. It is expensive to live here. It's insane to me. I watch House Hunters International, mildly obsessed. And every single time they're in some major city in the world and they're like, we want 17 bedrooms and 42 bathrooms. And my wife is an underwater basket weaver and I sing yodel and our budget is like $2.2 million. And yet they're able to get an apartment for like $1,600. 2-bedroom something apartment for like $1,600 in the center of the city. And I look at my husband every time and I'm like, why do we live here? Why? So providing that financial education, and not just the financial education for the basics of finances, but also like, how do you deal with the trauma of how you grew up with money? Right. And how is it holding you back from being able to save yourself or to have a retirement yourself?
That's a great question.
Right. And I hadn't even thought of it until I started working at Dress. And I realized that, again, bless my parents' hearts, they're amazing, but we never talked about, like, it was a secret how much your parents made. And we never talked about the family income or the finances. And so by the time I was 30, I'd racked up $30,000 in credit card debt because I didn't understand how it worked. And got influenced by a friend of mine who was like, oh, just put it on a credit card. Well, that becomes a quick motto, doesn't it? And so digging myself back out of that hole and learning better financial practices. But more importantly, I needed to deal with the trauma of why I did that so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Right.
So providing opportunities in that. And then, in our career support services, have either of you ever done career coaching?
No. Like been coached?
Yeah. Been coached.
A bit.
Have you ever looked into like how much it is for a career coach?
Oh, it's very expensive.
It's very expensive. Yeah. And listen, I want to be very clear. I think that career coaches are incredible professionals who absolutely, if you can afford the service that they provide, absolutely, they are 100% worth their value. But not everyone has the ability or the privilege to do that. And so we provide career coaching at absolutely no cost.
That's
right?
great.
To support women. I wish in my 20s when I was like, what do I do with my life? Right. I wish that I had known that that existed. Right. We provide workshops in, like we just did one on anxiety and the job search. Which was amazing. And we just, we launched a military program last year, for those transitioning out of the military, spouses and veterans. And we just did an elevator pitch workshop with them on Friday. And, you know, just like, how do you talk about yourself? How do you sell yourself? Like, what does that look like? So the idea being that no matter, we see it kind of as a wheel, right? Like no matter where you come into our services, it's a flywheel and you can, it's like a curriculum and you can keep going. And then there is the added benefit that we do have opportunities for interview clothing and, you know, and that career wardrobe. One of the big things there is, you know, how can we talk about women being economically independent if they have to use their first paycheck for clothing, right? Where we can provide that and allow them to invest that in them, in themselves or their families. So I think that's really where we make the impact in the community. We're not the first stop on the train. I'll be honest. We are not a clothing bank. We are not emergent services. There are some incredible organizations out there that do incredible work with that community. Right. We are probably the second or third stop on the train, right? Where when folks are ready to get back into the workforce, we are when folks already are in the workforce, but they might want to change or they're in a situation that's toxic. I had a woman once tell me, she's like, until I talked to my career coach, I had no idea that my work environment was toxic. She's like, for 14 years, I had been bullied and I had no idea. And it allowed her to move on to another job. Wow. Right. And so those are success stories.
And it has to be systemic.
It has to be systemic.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why we don't just provide clothing or just a computer or just this. We want women to sign up for the whole package. We want to be there when you get the job, when you get promoted, and when you retire. Like it's about long-term sustainable economic impact across the board. Sure, if we help you get the job and you go from making minimum wage to making $80,000 a year, if we're not there to help support you to know what the heck you do with the windfall of income, what are you going to do with it? You're going to you're going to scale up your lifestyle to match your income, and you're going to end up in exactly the same position again. So how do we support folks in this community to find those spaces in which they can claim their own power? They can take back the reins of their own economic destiny and create that freedom for themselves.
I'm curious how you what your hiring process is like.
I have a series of questions that you would wonder why I'm asking these questions. It's things like one of my questions is, what is the one thing under $10 that you can't live without? And people will be like, why would you ask a candidate that? And I'm like, because it tells me how industrious they are. It tells me how their brain works. Right. So if they immediately tell me that love is the one thing they can't live without, I now know that I'm working with someone who's emotions based, and it tells me a lot about them as a person. Right. So finding questions that show you who the person is. I am a big believer in will over skill. I can teach the skills. I need to know that you're going to show up with a positive attitude and that you are going to try and you're going to work hard and that who you are fits the role that we're trying to fill. So one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what is the wildest thing that's ever happened to you? Right? Yeah. You can learn so much from someone when you learn what the wildest thing that happened to them is. And it right down to whether they're even adventurous or not. Right? Yeah. And again, looking at all these things, none of it's good or bad. It just tells me what kind of person that you are.
I am curious. I know we've got time constraints, but
no, it's okay. I'll sit here and talk to you all day.
Talk to me more about recruiting board members. I didn't even think of that as a thing.
Yes. many years ago, I was part of an organization called the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network. And by happenstance, I ended up on their board development committee, which eventually I ended up chairing. And we started designing a recruitment process because we were struggling to get board members. And so that I had just suggested, I said, what if we make it competitive? Going back to what you said, like people love to compete. And all of a sudden, especially in an individualistic society like the United States, like the idea of being special, it's a big thing. And so we designed this whole process where we released an application, gave the illusion of being a competitive recruitment process, and got, I don't even remember. Let's say we got 20 applications for 2 board roles, right? And then we set it up to then do interviews and walk through the process and then whittle that down and eventually onboard board members that really stuck through the whole process. And by doing that process, the goal was to be onboarding board members that had shown a commitment to the organization.
And so you're looking for people who aren't going to they don't want just the line on the piece of paper.
Yeah,
they want that they're committed to putting in the time to do the work.
Maybe I'm off on this statistic, because 89% of all statistics are made up on the spot. But I would say 99% of nonprofits are at a point where they're operating with working boards in some capacity. And you need your board to support you at minimum with fundraising. They are the fiduciary responsibility for the organization. And I will die on this hill. Boards are responsible for fundraising. I will die on this hill. I don't want somebody who just wants it on their resume. I want somebody who says, hey, I'm a marketing professional. I really think I can help. What do you need? Going back to that concept of community driven, right? What do you need and how can I help? And for me to be able to come back and say, well, actually, here's what we need. We need help with refining our branding. And can you help me go from the idea stage in my brain, because I've identified the problem and I know how to fix it right over here, but I don't know how to take people along, right? So can you help me with that, right? And so you spend your time as a board member committed to the organization to do that with me. When I came on board with Dress back in the early 2023, I met with the governance committee because I love governance and kind of gave them a rundown of what the program looked. And the amazing women on our governance committee just took it and ran with it. It was absolutely incredible. We had 30 applicants that we then had to whittle down to 14 that we interviewed, that then we had to whittle down to 7 that came to our board meeting and met with us. And then we ended up seating 4 on the board, but they are 4 absolutely incredible women that are joining a group of 9 absolutely incredible women. And we're so fortunate. But I hear of other organizations that talk about, I just can't get people on my board. And I'm like, flip the script, make it competitive. I will walk you through how.
Talk to us about how you find and recruit donors.
Yeah, donors.
I ask.
Yeah. Oh, that's smart.
Honestly, I have, and I tell this to people all the time, I have no fear of the ask. I have absolutely no problem. In fact, Doni, as you were talking about how you're doing this podcast as part of your CSR initiatives, corporate social responsibility initiatives, honestly, the question that I wanted to say is, I think this is wonderful. I think it's amazing. And where are you putting your money? Because while this is an amazing organization, to me, or an amazing concept, to me, the biggest impact you could be making is giving every single one of these organizations some kind of donation in addition to having us on the show, showing that you value the work that we do and making an investment in your community here, not just by having us on the show, but actually putting those dollars into the work that we do, into your community. And I have no problem asking you to do that, right?
Well, you shouldn't, yeah.
And I think that's the number one thing. Like, so many executive directors come up through programs. It's less common for us to come up through fundraising. Often we end up in director of development or chief development officer roles. And I wanted to move out of development, but use those skills from a nonprofit management perspective. But it makes me an ED who has no problem asking. But I think the number one thing that nonprofits miss out on is making the ask simply by building the relationship. That to me is one of the biggest issues in nonprofiteering, right? Is the money is always an issue, but how we approach the money is I think the bigger question. And sometimes it can really hold nonprofits back.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, it's always been, we didn't want to be just take whatever we're going to set aside for this and just write checks.
Yeah.
I mean, because we could do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, but no, part of that thing that we're setting aside needs to be our time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it needs to be kind of
time, talent, treasure.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's, we want to do all of the, and then when the checks or it's more meaningful and we're at least to us, I think it feels like we're a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the difference between donating and investing.
What does a healthy, trusting relationship look like between a donor and a nonprofit?
I believe that a healthy, trusting relationship is that the nonprofit and the donor have had enough time to understand the work that is being done.
Mm-hmm.
Does the work align with the needs of the community? And does that particular need align with the passions of that individual? And when all of that aligns and that individual decides to invest in the organization, they do so with the trust that those funds will be utilized according to the needs of the community as the organization deems necessary.
Yeah.
That symbiotic relationship can take years to build. There are some people that it'll be automatic, right? Like the whole phrase, shut up and what is it? Shut up and take my money or whatever. There'll be times where it's just symbiotic immediately. And that's exactly what you want and you want to invest your dollars in it. And then there's other times that you do need time to see how is the organization functioning? What are they doing? And how can I support that? And is it ultimately what I really want to be supporting? Right. Because there are going to be folks that see the work that Dress is doing, but actually think that they want to invest in an organization for women that does something else, right? So the women are important to them, but maybe it's doing something else for women, right?
What if you don't ever get to be as much of a nomad?
I think about it sometimes. I'm here for at least 2 more years. My husband just was elected president of his union. So we are moving into a house, and there is a part of me that is mildly terrified that I'm getting myself stuck, that I'm getting myself comfortable. It is harder. I'm older. My anxiety is far worse than it used to be. I have some pretty significant health problems that come from getting very, very, very sick from 2020 to 22. And I do wonder if maybe my nomadic life is over sometimes. I do. It scares me.
Yeah.
I live and die by the motto, nothing is the end of the world until it is. And then you're dead. So who cares? And it's one of the most freeing things I ever learned. And so anytime I start to get worked up and my anxiety starts to rise that I might be getting myself stuck or maybe I won't move overseas again, I just try and remind myself, like, nothing's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Anything can change at any moment and you never know. I bought my dream car, absolute dream car, thinking I was going to be living in San Diego for God only knows how long. And 8 months later, I had to sell it back because I moved to Tokyo.
Where a car is useless.
And I was like, yeah, where a car is useless. And so, I mean, you just never know.
When it's all said and done and you look back, what do you want the impact that you have on society to be?
Me personally, or
Yeah,
the organization?
you.
Me personally. A lofty goal, obviously, would be to say I want every woman to experience the freedom that comes with being able to make her own decisions and stand by her beliefs and her expectations and what she wants and what makes her thrive, and to have women around her that, and men that support her in that process. From a less lofty perspective, I think some of my favorite work that I've done in the past is in advocacy. Prior to this, I was the executive director at the Washington WIC Association, so Women, Infant, and Children. And a lot of that job was advocacy work, meeting with legislators and really federal legislators, and really trying to educate them on the fact that WIC is not a public assistance program. It's a federal nutrition program, and why it's important to invest in women and infants and children. And one of my greatest successes was opening the door to a congresswoman that is not traditionally open to those conversations, and not only opening the door and getting that initial meeting, but then later being invited not only to attend an event and speak at that event with her, but then to actually meet her in her office at another time as well. And that is the kind of impact that step 1, 2, 3, where we build the relationship to a point where you actually create an impact that changes the course of how someone sees what needs to be done in the community. If I spend my life building relationships that can create that impact, then I've done the right thing.
Love that.
For people that love what you're doing, how can they get involved?
I was hoping you would ask that question. I've noticed a divide. Women over the age of about 50, when they see us out in the community, they're like, oh, you're the organization that does the clothes for women. How can I donate my clothes? And then if you're under the age of 50-ish, the response is, who are you? What do you do? And so I think it's a twofold answer. I think for those who know us as the clothes people, I think they can get involved by joining us for an info session or a community partner open house and learning about how much our work has shifted and changed, and how we really are looking at this from a much more holistic point of view. And that, yes, the clothing is there. Yes, it's an added benefit to what we do, but there's so much more to support a woman in her totality, rather than just one component of what a woman needs. And so there's that education component. And I think for folks that don't know who or what we are, those are the ones that I would say, come volunteer with us, come learn what we are doing, or more importantly, come take our services. We're not for one type of woman or one person in one situation or scenario or economic status. We are for any woman who wants to grow in her career, in her economic stability. I don't know a woman who feels that she is so economically stable that she doesn't need any help. Maybe a couple people on my board, but for the most part, I know very few women who would say, yep, I got this. I'm good. I'm set. I'm going to be able to retire. My kids will have money to inherit, like everything. Most women you talk to are like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm a disaster. I'm still living paycheck by paycheck. I want to change my career. I want to become a leader. I want to do this, or I want to do this, or I want to do this. We have programs for all of that. Get involved with us. We are here to support you wherever you are on your path.
We hope you enjoyed today's stories, and join us again at The Heart of Advocacy.
This episode was edited by Kendall Perkinson and mastered by Guido Bertolini. Produced by Deanna Fong and Taylor DeLine. Storyboard and podcast development by Luke Russell.
Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at We Are Advocates. As we wrap up, we'd like to express our heartfelt thanks to you, our listeners, for your continued support and engagement. I'm Donnie.
And I'm Ken.
Together, we are all working to make a world more equitable and just. You've been listening to The Heart of Advocacy.
See you next time.